Welcome back to the Pyramid. It's Monday again, so that means it's time for another Tom and Jerry game review. Today, I'll be talking about the first official fighting game in the series, which also happens to be the first ever 3D game in the franchise as a whole. Only releasing a few days earlier than its PS1 counterpart Tom and Jerry in House Trap, which I also played. And if I'm gonna be completely real with y'all, I barely even knew this game existed until around early 2022, even though it's been out for over 2 decades now. Mostly because I've always been a PlayStation kid and I've never owned an N64 or even played on an actual N64 console. But thankfully, due to the wonderful world of emulation, I was able to fully experience this game for the first time last year. Once again, since I was a PlayStation main, I actually did get to play the sequel title during the mid-2000s, and when I first started up Fist of Furry, it gave me a great feeling of deja vu as I had already grown accustomed to the controls and mechanics from the PS2 version. It was actually pretty cool to discover that this game was basically the precursor to War of the Whiskers. Despite their similarities, they're still technically different enough to set them apart. So, having said that, let's take a deeper look at Tom and Jerry Fists of Furry for the Nintendo 64 to see what this game's all about. Tom and Jerry Fists of Furry was the first and only time this franchise has graced the N64 and would eventually kick off the very short-lived era of actually good Tom and Jerry games. Everything else that came out before it, I'm not even going to bother addressing. Just from the general layout of the game, it seems to have taken inspiration from Capcom's arena fighter, Power Stone, where you run about and throw hands with your opponent in these small box-like stages in either single or multiplayer mode. Unlike Power Stone, there are only 2 characters that fight on screen at any given time instead of 4. And each of the 7 playable characters control decently, I'd say. Most play about the same with varying levels of attack strength. They all have a basic punch and kick combo, an item grab, a charge throw, a duck, no, not that kind of duck, and of course, a jump move. And speaking of the jump move, sometimes the fights against the computer can be really freaking annoying because they just run to the corner and spam the jump over and over and over again, so you have no choice but to throw something to knock them down. Also, I'm not sure why this game allows the player to infinitely hover in the air like they're trying to imitate Kirby. It's not really a big problem, mind you, I just figured I should note that. Anyway, despite how simple the controls are, each of the stages are full of items and power-ups to use as well as hazards to avoid. My personal favorite being the invincibility or any of the throwable explosives or melee weapons. They were all pretty fun and definitely helped keep the levels from getting stale, as there are only a handful of locations that get frequently reused in each of the characters' campaigns. Thankfully, I feel like this game captures the slapstick elements of Tom and Jerry in a pretty great way. It was always hilariously satisfying to smack your opponent with a hammer or frying pan until they're flat as a disc on the floor, or just hearing them scream out in pain as they get burned with steam or fire. Once again, the sound design did a good job of bringing the Tom and Jerry world to life. All of the thwacks, grunts, impacts, and crashes made the experience that more enjoyable. In fact, did you know that all the characters in this game are voiced by the same person? I guess with all that money they saved in labor costs allowed them to crank out a pretty decent soundtrack as well. Now, having said that, this game is not without a few little flaws here and there. Like I mentioned earlier, the AI can be really annoying when they're constantly spamming the throw and jumping away into the corner. and sometimes it felt like my attacks just refused to damage the opponent at all, even though I'm mashing the buttons right next to them. This might have just been an issue with the version I was playing on, but I'm not really sure, as this is the only version of the game that I've played. Let me know in the comments if this has happened to you as well. Also, when you eventually get bored of single and versus mode, that's just too bad because there is absolutely nothing else to do in this game. It's about as straightforward as possible, which is not a bad thing. It's just, if you were expecting more, then you'll probably be disappointed. But yeah, despite those few little issues, Tom and Jerry Fists of Furry was an enjoyable time for the most part, and I believe it was a necessary baby step to what would become the vastly improved War of the Whiskers. If you wish to try out this obscure classic game sometime, it is also available for Windows PC, as I'm sure most people don't currently have an N64 console these days. Or, if you want to see me play the game, I will place a link to part 1 of my playthrough in the description below. Next week on this Tom and Jerry month marathon, I will jump back over to the GBA to talk about Tom and Jerry Infernal Escape. Thanks for watching Anubis Black Games, have a good one, and I'll see you again next time.